who was imprisoned for 20 years, who tried to get out of prison every day of his life by making appeals, by fighting, by struggling, by doing everything he possibly could. When he was finally released, to go back to prison on a weekly basis to help other people. Wouldn't you think he'd want to get away forever and ever and forget it and let it be? But what happened for this one single person, and it's happened to a number of people because I've read a lot about people who've been incarcerated, is that he had an awakening. And he had an awakening that not all of us have. And the awakening was, he realized that when he was in a small cell, that he'd always been in a prison. And most of us don't realize we're in prison because the cell is so big and we can walk around and we have so many things that we can play with that we actually think we're free. It wasn't until he'd been in prison for about a year that he realized that he'd been in prison all of his life, and he suddenly declared that he was free. They gave him some paint that he could paint with, but instead of painting on paper, he painted on the wall. And he painted the future of his life on the wall. He painted his dreams on the wall. He painted the names of the people that he loved and cared about on his wall. And he brought all of the people into this small room so that he could get out of prison. I think that's an important lesson for us to look at. How often are we imprisoned by the thoughts that we have that are so small that there's no room for us? How often are we imprisoned by ideas and limitations that we've agreed on that don't reflect who we really are, but reflect what people have told us about ourselves? I have a younger brother who has since passed on, who told me one time, "Bob, you might want to do radio, but not TV." I said, "Why?" He said, "You don't have a TV face." He was right. But I've also since seen a number of actors who don't have TV faces. And they've done amazingly well, you see, because they had a TV heart. They had TV consciousness. They had something they wanted to deliver, and the medium happened to be TV. If my brother could see me now, he would say, "How can you do this? You don't have a TV face." What I want you to pay attention to today more than anything else is that what keeps you from love is you. There is no outside force that can keep you out of love. I had a stroke some years ago, which I've told you about before. So Monday, I'll be going back to the hospital to talk to all the new employees about when someone comes in who's had a stroke, how to treat them. Now you would think, having had a stroke, I'd want to get as far away from it as I can. Except that I had the same experience when I had a stroke as people have had when they've been put in prison. I was faced with the possibility of a prison unlike any I'd ever faced before, that could have lasted the entire life that I had left, and would have left me in a condition where I could see the world but couldn't participate in it. It made me wonder if I was participating as much as I need to. It made me wonder what I would do if I recovered, to have that recovery represent something other than I survived. You could say I had a stroke and I got out of prison. You could say that you have had things happen to you that you have allowed to imprison you, but also, as Judith said, have the possibility of awakening you. And when you've been awakened to the possibility of who you really are, there is no such thing as a prison. There are no walls that can keep you. There's nothing that can keep you from you. When Judith came up with a title this week, which was Love, the song that immediately came to mind was, "What's love got to do with it? It's a secondhand emotion." Whoa, nothing like being a little cynical. What's love got to do with it? Just everything. What about that secondhand emotion? Well, you see, one of the things that it argues with is how can you count on something that is so vague and so difficult to see, that is primarily recognized and seen as a feeling? In fact, the only symptom of love is the emotion that you feel. If you didn't have any feelings, you wouldn't know about love. Love is not the feeling you get, but love is the feeling you get is a symptom of the love that you feel. And that's an interesting thing. So what are your beliefs that keep you from loving? What are your beliefs that keep you out of touch with the emotion that would allow you to do what the babies did, which is just laugh until they fell down? You see, we have a laugh until I better not laugh that loud. We have a laugh, is this the right time to laugh? We have a laugh, I hate it when I laugh so loud that other people look at me. So we have a conditional laugh. And our laugh is so conditioned that after a while, Just smile and grin a little bit and hope that's not too much. We have inhibited our own laughter. We have inhibited our own joy. We have inhibited the expression of love. That is who we really are. I know that when my dog would see me after a little while of my being away, like 10 or 15 minutes, he would run as fast as he could in hope that I would stop him and not fall down. And then immediately want to lick my entire face and head because I have no hair. And he just would not stop until I would say, it's okay. And he would say, no, it's not okay. I'm having fun. This is love. This is love. A picture I saw recently of a woman who had saved a swan. The swan jumped up in her lap. She's holding the swan, and the swan is holding her by wrapping his entire neck around. And you see the swan's bill, and the swan is saying, I love you. The swan didn't have any words. The swan had the same thing the grizzly bear had that I saw, bringing the man who loved it closer with these huge claws. He'd bring him closer and hug this man. This 600-pound grizzly bear is hugging this man, and this man is saying, I understand, and I can love you back. There was no fear, there was only love. See, all of us are afraid of the grizzly bear. We're afraid of these things to the point where the fear is what gets in the way of the possibility of us being who we are. Years ago, my very first job was selling Fuller Brush.
Oh my God.
Door to door. And people would let their dogs out when they saw me coming, which was not exactly perfect. So at one point, I see the door open, and I look, and it's a Doberman. I don't know any German songs, but I know it's a Doberman, and he's really big. And he's already growling, and he begins to run toward me, and I don't know what to do. And then it occurs to me that I need to get down to the level where I can meet him. And I simply sat down on the ground, stretched out both my arms, and waited for him. He continued to run and to growl and to bark to let me know that he was going to kill me as many times as he could. And as he got closer to me and I didn't move, he said, maybe this isn't really a person. And then he got even closer to me and he finally slowed down. I could see him thinking German thoughts. It's his heritage as a war dog. Until finally he stopped. And he looked at me and he put his nose on my nose. And I looked at him. And I looked down. And he looked down. And we wondered what we should do. He sat down. I slowly reached my hand over and began to rub his ear. He bent his head into my hand. And then I took my other hand and rubbed his other ear. And he bent his hand into my other ear. And then he just looked at me. And all the while I'm looking at him, I'm also looking at the woman looking through the window behind the curtain, waiting for the blood. And there isn't going to be any. And I learned that you can meet any condition with love, and even if it doesn't work, it's better than what you would have done without it. You see, it's very possible I could have sat down and been an easier meal. In which case, what I could have said at the end of it is, he died, but he made the Doberman happy. He didn't have to work for it. Or on the other hand, he made friends with it. How many of us are making friends with ourselves, the Doberman inside, the rule keeper, the one who's rigid and worried, the one who's afraid? Because what I saw when the Doberman was going to attack me was he was saying, I have to do this because I'm afraid. I'm afraid because you're on my property, you're going to violate something, and nobody should be on my property without my permission, and I don't know what to do, so I guess I'm going to go after you. Have any of us ever said that? Mm-hmm. And so when he finally realized that I wasn't going to attack him, he didn't have to attack me. He said, oh my God, I don't have to be afraid anymore. And when he lent me his ear, I had to do that. It was out of the comfort that he felt that he was now safe. We have to get to the point, because we decide to be safe in our own skin. Nobody can imprison you. You can love as much as you want. You can love as often as you want. One day at the hospital, I was greeting people as they came in, and there were 10 people in line, and I greeted every one of them with a different greeting, because every one of them was a different person. And they were all wearing different outfits, and so I commented on a sweater, I commented on a pair of shoes. One woman had the most amazing hairdo, I commented on her hairdo. One woman had more light in her eyes than I've seen generally in the sky. I mentioned that to her because you couldn't help but miss it or see it. And finally this man walked up and says, I suppose you do that with everybody. I said, absolutely. He said, "That's slick." I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "It's not honest." I said, "Probably not as honest as it could be." He said, "See?" I said, "No, you don't understand. I need the practice. I'm not as good about caring about people as I'd like to be. So I practice every day with everybody that I meet." He looked at me, and I said, "And by the way, you've got the perfect haircut." It looked just like mine. And he smiled. I said, "Come on back and we'll find other things that we can enjoy together." And he walked away, not hostile, not friendly, but questioning. You see, you love people not because you're good at it, but because you need to practice. Because the more you love people, the more you find out about love. If you've ever had a hobby, the thing that made it exciting wasn't having it as a hobby. It was what you discovered about it as you explored it, as you went deeper and deeper into it. For many, many years, I spent more money than God on audio equipment. I still would if I weren't married to Judith. I would have speakers just because they were on sale. And I can remember one time I had a very, very fine pair of speakers that were made in England by English engineers who gave a great deal of attention to everything from fit and finish to the beauty and the delivery of the most perfect sound. And I ended up giving those speakers at one point to someone who needed a pair of speakers. I had replaced them with something larger. And he told me one day, he said, "You know, they're not that good." And I said, "Well, let me see what you're doing with them." And he had them laying next to each other on a cabinet with a bunch of stuff on top of them, hooked up, and he said, "They don't sound very good." I said, "Let me tell you the history of these speakers. Let me tell you about the $5 million that was spent on research so that the arrival time of the sound would be perfect when you got it." I said, "Really?" "Let me tell you about that it isn't veneer, it's solid wood." "Really?" I said, "Let me put them on speaker stands so that they can be appreciated and respected for who they are." It's okay. And we did. "Let's get some decent wire so that the sound can get from the amplifier to the speakers in a way that makes them sound like they're valued." It's okay. We did all of that, and he said, "Oh my God, they're amazing." How many of us have not allowed people in your life to be amazing because we put them on a shelf and stacked a bunch of stuff on top of them? It's just an ordinary person. No, there's no ordinary people. There's only exceptional people with an ordinary observer. We need to become exceptional observers. We need to become better detectives. We need to look for the magic and look for the wonder and look for the joy and look for the surprise. And as soon as you start looking, people will volunteer it. I cannot tell you how sad it makes me feel when women come to the hospital on a daily basis that I see, and I will say something like, "I love your hair, it's beautiful. You have made my day." Excuse me? How many other compliments do you get? Not many. That's the sad part. The sad part is how little it takes to have somebody tell me that their day has been made better because of what I think could be a superficial compliment that I mean. And they get that I mean it, because if they don't, and I tell them, "And if your hair didn't look good, I wouldn't say anything, I would just look down." So they know that I'm not just saying it, it's not an obligatory compliment. But what I notice is we're hungry, really hungry, to be seen, to be loved, to be cared about, to be valued. Every one of us. So when we give value to another person, in a kind of way, we give value to ourselves as well. And we need to practice. This week, I want you to go out and love everybody you possibly can, not because you're good at it, because you need to practice. And if somebody's a little surprised or kind of uncomfortable and saying, "I don't think I like a hug," that's okay, I'm just practicing. I'm learning how to do it. I'm not real good at it. Be honest, because you're not, because you're going to fall down. You're going to stumble. And there's always somebody I go to hug who's, "I don't think so." I got it. Can we shake hands? No, don't touch me. And that's okay too, because you can touch them with your heart. You can touch them with a comment. You can touch them with love. You can touch them by leaving them alone and allowing them and saying, "That's okay. That's a good way for you to be because it works for you." Love is a very interesting thing because it comes in many, many different forms, but it's always a feeling in your heart and in your gut that you have to think about, but nevertheless it occurs there first. It's a feeling that comes out of the kind of thinking that you've been doing that you may not even realize you've been doing. Have you ever noticed on a bad day when you're kind of miserable, There's not much that's very beautiful. And if somebody tries to point something out to you that's beautiful, thank you, I don't have time for this, okay, I'm really busy. Yeah, but look at the babies. I don't want to see babies anymore. They should all stay in the hospital where they were born. You know, they just get big and then they get addicted and they have problems. Yeah, I ask people when they come into the hospital with their babies, are you here for your baby to get treated, or is this a return? And they look at it like, really? Yeah. So if it's a return, take it to Costco. You don't need a receipt. And if it's over 2 years old, they won't want it either. At 2 years old, they all want to get rid of them at that point, yeah. We have to practice as much as we can in as many ways as we can, but practice where you're comfortable first. Practice where you know somebody. Practice in the morning telling the person that you wake up next to, you are really amazing. You are really a beautiful human being. And think about a couple of reasons why they are. And tell them. Because you need to practice and because they need to hear it. We're going to grow. We're going to grow because people get that when they come here, it's not about Judith, it's not about me, it's about you. You are here because you were exceptional and amazing, and you want to be acknowledged for that in some way. And the first way that you can be acknowledged for how great you are is that if you sit here and listen carefully, you'll be acknowledging yourself. Because what we want to give you is your acknowledgement of yourself in a way that you can say, I am somebody. You know, I forget that. I get confused, I get overwhelmed, I get in my work mode and I forget I am somebody. You are somebody, you are significant, important, valuable, and beautiful. You are that rose. I picked that particular song, not the song, but the song I picked because it fit. But I picked that rendition because there were 5 renditions. And I picked that rendition because all of the men that were singing that song were old enough to have given up on roses. And they hadn't. And when they sang that song, they were the rose. They were somewhere between 12 and 21. They were young and alive and vibrant. And they were their age. And they wore that comfortably. And what they said was, we know something, and we haven't quit. We haven't given up. The next time in the back of your mind when you hear yourself saying, well, you know, I'm getting older now, I need to slow down. I need to stop doing things. You know, people tell me that I need to give up this and give up that. Give it up. It's not true. You know, my favorite pet peeve, which I'll just mention briefly, is people telling me, when you get older, you don't need a big house anymore, you need less space. It's a message about, you know, when you get older, you're not camping out. Really. I don't need a small tent to live in until it's over. I need more space now than I needed 10 years ago. Many of you need more space than you needed 10 years ago, but you haven't admitted it. You're like, I know we're downsizing. I used to have a lot of things. I used to have a life. I used to have a space. I had my own driveway. I had my car, everything. I don't have anything at all. Why am I unhappy? Maybe it's time to make your world on the inner larger and make your world on the outer as large as it used to be. And when people tell you that it's too small or too big, ask yourself, is that true? What can I do? Judith and I are going to have a townhouse, 2-story, and one. We're going to have a backyard. It's going to be fenced. We'll have a doggy door. And we'll have at least one standard poodle. Do we have that right now? In mind, we have it. How long will it take Boris to have it? I don't know. But you see, I have that in mind rather than, well, maybe I can live in a smaller box until I get to be in the final box. You know, really, we don't need to prepare for a small box. We need to prepare for more life. Because the more prepared we are for more life, the more life is prepared for us to have more. It is that law of supply. It is that law of supply and demand. When you demand more, the supply will increase, you'll have more. I swear that every one of us spends some of our time every day making our world smaller and complaining that it's not big enough. And we just need to think about that and change that consciousness. We can do that. We can do it beautifully. We can do it easily. We can do it elegantly. Let's practice. Thank you.
Thank you.